hang on.
Yeah.
Great. All right. Good evening, everyone. We're here today for the Education Committee meeting, and I'd like to gratefully acknowledge that we're on the traditional and unceded territories of the Comox First Nation, and we are thankful for the opportunity to work with their families and to teach their children. And welcome, everyone. And tonight, we're going to be talking about testing instruments, and we're going to also be brushing up our skills on acronyms. And hopefully somebody's going to help us through that, as well as I hear there's going to be a hands-on experience for us tonight. And so I'm going to just let everybody know in the meeting that we are being recorded. And now I'm going to turn over the meeting to Mr. Douglas, our Director of Instruction.
Thank you very much, Trustee Waite, and it's always a pleasure to be here tonight, and thank you everybody for tuning in. I've been told I only have 29 minutes because I'm first, and then we'll have Jackie or Joanne follow. So we're going to be covering three things tonight, three really exciting topics. We'll talk a little bit about FSA, and then Joanne's going to talk about EDI, TDI, and I put the descriptors in the chat function, MDI, and she'll talk a little bit about the work that we've been doing in the community around those. And thank you, Joanne, for coming tonight. It's always good to have you here. And then we have Jackie, who's our lead teacher in early learning, and she's going to talk about all of these wonderful projects that we've got going on in School District 71. So we're each going to try and keep to our 30 minutes. So at the end of the night, you get a full presentation. And if you say at the end of this, boy, that was sure exciting, we'd sure like to hear some more, we can always come back. So I want to, if I could, and I've got this incredible assistant, Jeff Manning's helping me manage the technology because we've never done this before in a pandemic. We're going to actually look at the FSA virtually. And we're going to, before we begin, as you can see in the notes, if you could get yourself a piece of paper and something to write with, because we're going to have a little bit of an opportunity to do something that the kids do. And I want you to have that same experience. I do this with teachers when we're marking the FSA, and I do this with teachers when we are setting the standards and when we're doing the monitoring session in the summer. So the very first thing I wanted to do is give you a little bit of background, which you've already heard many times from me. The FSA is a provincial big picture assessment. It's written by BC teachers based on the BC curriculum administered to BC students, marked by BC educators. So just want people to realize and remember it has three components to it: reading, writing, and numeracy. And lots of the test items are multiple choice, where the children sit at a computer to do it, and some of them are written response. When we form our marking team, we're looking at the written response items, and we're marking them based on a rubric. We submit 50 papers selected at random from this district at grade 4 and grade 7 that go to the ministry, and all other 60 districts in the province do the same thing. And then in the summer we come together and we have a team of teachers selected at random across the province that say they'll do this in the summer, and we remark all of the papers to see how close it aligns with what the district gave and what the provincial team would give. So we've done our marking, we've done our administering, and we're going to focus tonight on the written response part of the numeracy. And I wanted to, first of all, show you how do we score a paper. So Jeff, if you could bring the rubric up, please. And thank you, everybody, because it's a little clunky. If we were here in person, I'd just be handing out things to you or showing it up on the board. But okay, and Jeff, if you can,
have it there, Alan?
if you could just make it a little bit larger for people whose eyes are like mine, and it's getting, that's perfect. So the FSA numeracy scoring rubric is a 4-point scale. And what we do is we take the student's response, and we're always looking for what I call the line of best fit. So is the student's work are the descriptors in column 1, 2, 3, or 4, which best describes what the student's done. So the snapshot gives us the key things to look at. Is it a student demonstrating limited ability, demonstrating basic, demonstrating proficient, or advanced? And if you bring the rubric up, Jeff, you can see NR just means there's no response, the page is blank, or a 0, they just copied stuff from the page and didn't do anything with it. Then we also drill down a little further and we see, okay, reason or analyze. Does the work support 1, 2, 3, or 4? Do they understand the problem? 1, 2, 3, or 4? And this is where we get into, do they have a strategy? Do they have a way to solve it? Isn't it an appropriate strategy? So if you want to get a 4, you can see the descriptors that your work needs to meet to get to the 4. Then if we go down a little bit further, the last one is about understanding and representing. And we look at, can they communicate the problem, all the way through to a really good solution, supported with a good explanation. It's clear, it's concise. And what I always do with students is I say, this is how we're scoring it. This is the criteria. So children know before they get started, what is it that we're looking at? So I'm going to take you now into the grade 4 first question that all the students in the province were faced with. And this is where you want to get your pencil ready. And if you were in the classroom, we wouldn't read this to you, but you can see there's 3 parts to it, A, B, and C. So on your paper, you're going to put down A, B, and C. Students would actually have a booklet to write this in, so they didn't have to recopy anything. We're feeding birds, scoops of bird feed. And we have the finch, the canary, the dove, and the budgie. And you may not know this, but Jeff is a bird person. He's an ornithologist. He loves birds inside and out. So when he saw this problem, he was highly engaged in this problem and loved it before he even read it because it was about birds. So they start off, Alex needs to feed 5 budgies. How many scoops of birdseed does she need? So if you could just take a minute to work out part A, I'll give you a minute to do that.
And Alan, I'll also help you by being your timekeeper. You're down to about 15
I know.
minutes.
How many?
15.
Oh, geez. Okay. Let's move up to B. Each scoop holds 20 grams of birdseed. How many grams of birdseed are needed to feed 5 budgies? So you use the information from the chart and you figure out how many does it take to feed 5 budgies. So students are working on, so they need some information from part A, they need some information from part B, and then that takes us over to part C. Jeff, so if you can just bring it down and shift it over, that's perfect. So there's lots of ways to do this. After feeding the budgies, Alex feeds some of the other birds. She has 1 bag of birdseed. Each bag holds 320 grams of birdseed. You have to use the whole bag of birdseed. And can you think of one combination to feed at least 2 kinds of birds that Alex can feed? And like I say, there's many, many ways to do it. I just need you to show me one combination. So if you can take a minute to work on A, B, and C, I'm going to then go over the answers with you. You can see how well you did. And remember, these are grade 4 students. Typically, they're writing this in October. So they've just got into grade 4, just gotten out of grade 3. All of the work required to do this would be on learning outcomes that they would have encountered in anywhere from kindergarten to grade 3. Nothing can be a pure grade 4 learning outcome because we don't know if all teachers taught it before the test was administered. Okay? So Jeff, if I can get you now to go to the exemplar. This is a grade 4 student's work. And I'm sorry, the way it copied, I didn't get it right. So let's start on the right-hand side and make it just a little bit larger if we could, Jeff. You can see the student is able to go 6 times 5 for the number of scoops for 5 birds, comes out to 30 scoops for birdseed. And I know you all got that part right. You're probably feeling pretty comfortable. So let's go up to B now. And remember, 20 grams of bird seed for each scoop. How many bird seed are needed to feed the 5 budgies? 20 multiplied by 30, they need 600 grams of bird seed. So kids have got the first 2 parts, and then if we go over to the second section, Jeff, and that's it. The question is, give us some combinations. So they've showed you, well, one budgie is 120 grams, another budgie is 120 grams. That works out to 240, and then 2 canaries are 40 each. That works out to 320. So that's one combination. She can feed 2 budgies and 2 canaries. And we love it that they've shown all their work. They finished it off with a sentence. There's nothing left out to say, okay, what's next? We scored this one a 4 out of 4. But there's lots of other ways to do it. So who has a different way to do it? Michelle, I see your hand getting ready to go up. Do you have a different combination, Michelle?
I did. I just have to attach my bird to it. I had one hungry dove.
Yes.
And one hungry budgie.
You are correct. Look at that. You got one of the combinations. Now I know Joanne loves to do math. Joanne, do you have a different combination, or have we already got your 2?
I had the same combination as Michelle.
How about you, Sheila?
I had 1 dove and 3 canaries.
1 dove and 3 canaries. Okay, and what have you got? Thank you, Sheila. That's another one. Brenda, you're the number person here. What did you come up with?
I'm sorry, the dog ate my homework. I didn't get that far.
Brenda, is that dog? Angus, you bad dog, you. Okay, SJ, I know you just helped scribe a math test today, SJ, and you got the little guy with you. What do you have a different combination?
He heard his name, so he came into the camera because his name's Angus.
Okay, hi, Angus.
I also went the simple route and with a hungry dove and a hungry budgie.
Okay, does anybody have anything else? Tom, did you want to tell us your answer, or did your dog eat yours too? You're muted, but I think he's saying his dog ate his. So Janice, I know you were a little bit nervous about me putting you to the test. What did you get, Janice?
I had 1 dove and 1 budgie.
Okay, what about Kat? You came on late, but I remember you being a good math student back in grade 3. How did you do, Kat?
I had 1 budgie, 2 canaries, and 2 finches.
There you go. Feeling pretty good, eh? That's a good one. And Jackie, what did you get?
I had the same as the student, 2 budgies and 2 canaries.
Okay, well, there's so many different ways to do it, and students only had to come up with one, and those are the 3 parts to the question, and that gives you a good idea of what we do at grade 4. Jeff, and there's 3 of these problems that the grade 4s would do and 3 at grade 7. Jeff, do we have time to look at the grade 7 question?
Yeah, I think we do. I'll put it up right now.
Okay, so get your pencils ready, and I'm going to tell you right now, it is grade 7. It's a tiny bit harder. And remember, these learning outcomes only would be introduced at grade K to 6, nothing that's purely grade 7. So we have Mr. Wong is randomly handing out balls to his students. The bin contains red balls, blue balls, and green balls. Now there's some conditions, as there are in all math problems. There are more blue balls than red balls, and the probability of getting a green ball is 75%. Now for some of you, that's going to turn you off right there thinking, oh dear, let me think about this. How many balls of each color could possibly be in the bin? How many would be red? How many would be blue? And how many would be green? And then for part B, what is the smallest possible number of balls that could be in the bin? Show your thinking. So I'll give you a few minutes to see what you can do with this question, and then we'll take a look at it. Any questions? And remember, if I was the teacher, I wouldn't be reading the question. I would just let them go and do it. So I'll give you a few minutes to do it.
It's probably a good thing that I did turn off that clock, because right now while everyone was thinking, it would just be ticking away and they'd
Like
feel
in
they were
Jeopardy.
Jeopardy
like-
or something.
Like you're doing Jeopardy. And this is hard enough because there's so many combinations. My brain's overworking now. They say as you get older, you overthink. When you're younger, you just go with the flow. And I need to not overthink.
Okay, don't overthink. I'll give you a clue. Remember with percent, it's usually meaning like 100% on a test is really good. Why don't you start with thinking of 100 balls? That might make it easier for you.
Alan, on part B,
Yes.
if you have would we be rounding up, or can we all, like if you had a half a ball?
No, no half balls. Have to be full balls.
Huh.
That's my question.
Well,
So
because if when you look at part B, so it's not saying how many balls there could be. So it would be like, so let's say 100 balls, 75%. So let's say there's 75 green balls. That leaves 25 balls left. So if there's more blue balls than red balls, then there would be like a combination of those kinds. But the smallest possible number of balls that could be in the bin would be,
to meet that requirement, what is the smallest number? Now, the one you just gave is probably one of the higher numbers, but what is the smallest number that meet the same combination? Some are green, and they have to be 75% of the balls. Some are blue and some are red. So Jeff, let's go to the student one because I know we're going to run out of time because I see it's 6:50 already. You're going to ding me and I'm not even going to get to show the answer.
Okay.
it would be one, wouldn't it?
The dog's eating the pizza now?
Yeah, the dog came and snatched the kid's pizza. That's why I've been ducking out because now I'm gonna make up something else.
Okay, so Jeff's going to bring up the solution, grade 7, and make it just a little bit larger, Jeff.
Yeah.
So Sarah Jane actually led us through this very first part. So she went with the 75 green, then you could have 13 blue, 12 red, or you could have different blue and different red. As long as you met the requirement, 75% have to be green, okay? So look at this student went on to show you the fractions, and they explained it in great detail. Very common to see kids solve the problem this way. Then if you shift over, Jeff, to part B and bring it down just a little bit, he said if there were 12 balls, 9 would be green, and that is 75% of 12. 2 would be blue and 1 would be red. So that's the smallest combination that meets that requirement. But what this student did is, just in case you don't think there's enough, let me show you another one. 15, 3, and 2. That's not the smallest, but they gave you another one just for kickers. And that's the thing I love about looking at kids work like this. It's so great to see their thinking and seeing how they're describing it. And that's kind of what the questions look like at FSA for grade 4 and grade 7. Then what we like to do with these is once they're scored and we give them back to the schools, we say to the schools, take a look at the work that you have, share it with your teachers. So take a look at numeracy and see how your kids have done. Do you think that there's any lessons learned that you can have? Like if your kids are all at a 2, what can you do to get them to a 3? What can you do to get them to a 4? Work with children to show them this is your score. This is how you did. Would you like to get to a 3 or 4? I've never asked that question and had kids say to me, no, I don't, it doesn't matter to me. Well, this is what you can do. This is it, showing your work, explaining things, communicating it well. That's really important. Showing a strategy, all of those kinds of things are really important when we look at the FSA and the numeracy. And like I said, we're at the next part we'll be doing the monitoring session and participating with the province to see how well our scores lined up. Every year in the province, most districts are lining up between 94 and 96 correlation, meaning what the provincial team scored it and how the school district scored it is that correlation's that tight, which is really good. So that's our FSA. I wanted to just show you a little bit about FSA. Numeracy 4 and Numeracy 7 questions and the rubric and how we score it, and then how schools use the results. And then we send home an envelope, and it has the student's test booklet in it. It has, so the parents can actually see what were the questions. It has the actual scoring sheet, the little report that goes with it, and a little letter, and it has some links to it to the ministry. And it has, if you have any questions, call the school principal. And that's FSA. No big mystery. That's what it is. Any
Great.
questions?
Well, you're out of time though.
54.
Oh, is that your job, Mr. Manning?
No, that's fine.
We need to admit poor Tanya. She hasn't been admitted yet.
Okay, well, I can't see her, so if somebody could let her in, that would be great.
Just now.
I'm worried if we won't have enough time, if folks want to hold all their questions to the end.
We can, and I just want to thank all of you for participating. I know you're risk takers, so thank you for taking your risk and plunging in. And when I centered some of you out to say, what's your answer? I didn't mean to center you out, but I wanted you to know that we wanted to have you all involved. So thank you for doing that. And I'm going to turn over now, Joanne or Jackie, who wants to go next?
Go ahead, Joanne.
Joanne, you okay to do it?
Thanks. Yeah, I'm ready.
Thank you.
I'll share my screen. Okay. Well, I'm very worried that my presentation won't be nearly as fun as Alan's. That was a ton of fun, Alan. Thank you. It's a hard act to follow. I'm Joanne Schroeder. Some of you I don't know. Some of you I do. Just a little bit about me. I've lived here in the Comox Valley for about 30 years, and my kids went to school in the Comox Valley system. My grandkids are on the cusp of going to school in the Comox Valley system. I had a long career of working at UBC, doing this work on children's development and research. I left that job and came back to have a saner life of being the executive director of the Child Development Association here, so that I didn't have to commute all the time. And then I retired in January of 2020, but like Mr. Douglas, I didn't last on that retirement front for too long, and I've now gone back to UBC to continue with some of the work that I've done for many years. Although, you know, one blessing, I suppose, of COVID is that I don't actually have to go to Vancouver. I can do all of my work from my basement in Comox. So, but I'm just always really glad to be part of the discussion of all of these things in the Comox Valley, because it is the place of my heart. So thank you for inviting me. So I hope you guys know about the Human Early Learning Partnership. We're at UBC. We're an interdisciplinary research institute, and we've been doing research on children across the province and across the country, really, for about 20 years now. I always put this slide up because it is the time now, nearly 25 years ago, when and at that time I was a child protection and social worker, actually, started to think about the importance of the early years, when this Time magazine came out in February of 1997. And I remember it very clearly, being down in my office in Nanaimo at that time and looking at this with my boss and saying, you know, we really need to think more about how we're kind of, you know, backing up the bus in respect to how we're intervening with kids and their well-being. So it's been a long time for me that I've been really advocating for the importance of the early years, and I'm very excited about all of the work that this school district is doing in respect to the early years. This is our little mantra at HELP. If we don't have any data, if we're not able to shine the light on what the issues are, then we're not compelled to take action to change that data. Here's your little cheat sheet for all of the acronyms that we were talking about earlier. This is the work that we do monitoring children's development over time. So we have the toddler development instrument, 12 to 24 months, completed by parents or caregivers. We have the childhood experiences questionnaire, completed at the start of kindergarten by parents and caregivers. Both of those instruments have been completed in the Comox Valley. We have the EDI, the early development instrument, which I'm going to talk a little bit more deeply about this evening. The EDI is really the mothership. I describe it as of the work at HELP. We've been doing this for about 20 years, and so have data on many, many kids across the province. The middle years development instrument, administered at grade 4 and grade 7 in the voice of the students. So they answer all of the questions about their social emotional development, their relationship with peers, their parents, all of those kinds of things. And then we're just now piloting the youth development instrument, or the YDI, which is the grade 11 tool. So that's just happening in 3 districts in the province at the moment, but we're really excited about that work and hope that we'll be able to be rolling it out across the province before too long. Doesn't want to move. Stuck. Oh, there we are. Oh, now it moves too fast. I'm going to talk mostly about the EDI. So that is the tool completed by kindergarten teachers on all of the children in their class in the kindergarten year of February. Just to make a note that the work that we do is what we talk about is population level monitoring. So although the teachers will complete the tool on every child in their class, we never look at individual results. So we would never tell you how Johnny was doing on his EDI or how Susie was doing on her EDI, but we will tell you how groups of kids are doing in neighborhoods, in schools, in school districts across the province. So it's really the kind of assessment, which is very similar to the FSA, as Alan described it. This is really designed to give us a picture, a snapshot of all of the kids across the district at the same time, rather than being an individual assessment or test. We measure things on these 5 domains, so it's a very holistic measure of children's development. We report on the numbers and the percentage of children who are vulnerable, who are at increased risk of encountering difficulties throughout their school journey. Vulnerability, by our definition, is really it's a statistical definition, and based on the kids who fall in the bottom part of the range of scores. Another thing we have done at HELP, though, over time, is we are able to link how kids are doing on the EDI to how they do later on their FSAs. And what we're able to see is that kids who come into kindergarten vulnerable by our definition are more likely to be still behind in grade 4 or grade 7. So that gives us some confidence that this definition of vulnerability actually does tell us that these are kids that we need to pay attention to, because they will face more challenges as they enter the school system. Important to say about the EDI is, even though it's administered at kindergarten, it's really designed to be a reflection of what has come before kindergarten. So it's really with the foundational value that the early years matter. The early years are critical to lifelong health and well-being. What we're trying to get is a picture, a reflection of what has happened to children before they get to school. And the reason we do it in kindergarten, because it's really the first chance to get at all kids. So, but it isn't about schools. It's really more designed to be about neighborhoods and the experiences that kids have had prior. This just tells you that we have a lot of data. Nearly 300,000 EDIs have been completed in BC over the last 15 years. Overall in BC, it's not the happiest of stories. We've stayed, as you can see there from that trend line, around 30% or 30, now we're at about 33% of children who are vulnerable in some aspect of their development or behind where we would want them to be. 33.4% in our most recent data collection. But looking at one provincial number doesn't tell us the whole story. We see a huge range across the province. And so at the school district level, we see a range that a low of only 13% of kids vulnerable up to a high of 55%. And when I think about that range, I also think about the kinds of complexities that schools will face. I mean, think about a kindergarten teacher where 13% of their kids are vulnerable compared to what one faces where 55% of the kids in their classroom have challenges. So it really does start to compound quite quickly as kids progress through the system. At the neighborhood level, the variation is even higher. To some neighborhoods in BC where almost 70% of the children are behind where you would want them to be at kindergarten entry. As you might guess, one of the things that explains the variation in vulnerability is income. We can explain about 50% of the vulnerability based on socioeconomic status. So as you can see here, provincially, children who are in the lowest income quintile, 42% of them were vulnerable, whereas it goes down stepwise to kids who are much less vulnerable in the higher income groups. It's not as simple a story as just income. And in fact, interestingly, we see around the province that particularly in the areas of social and emotional development, there is very little relationship between how kids are doing and their socioeconomic status. So, you know, the simplest way I can describe that is kind of this notion of, you know, poor little rich kid, or money can't buy me love, or, you know, those kinds of things. Social emotional development is a very complex thing and doesn't have that same relationship to income as, say, our physical development, which is more about just, you know, if kids are coming to school hungry, fatigued, those kinds of things. I'll tell you some brief things about the Comox Valley. I'm going to talk to you about Wave 7, which was collected between 2016 and 2019 here. But the majority of kids that we're looking at today were in kindergarten a while ago now, in 2016-17. Comox Valley just finished their collection for the Wave 8, so we'll be getting some new data quite soon. One thing that's sort of a summary finding of VDI is that vulnerability rates increased consistently for a number of years in our community, but decreased for the first time in Wave 7. And while we don't know this for sure, those of us who've been working hard in the community to, you know, really facilitate the work of the early years, all of the early learning programs that are happening in the district, I think they're making a difference. I think that we're really starting to get some traction around how people are accessing services and the difference that they're making. So, but as I say, I don't know that for sure. That's just my hopeful speculation. And I hope when we see the Wave 8 data, although COVID's going to factor in there, that we'll see a continued decrease. So you see that the Comox Valley has for some time been above the provincial average for overall vulnerability. So if you look at the bottom of that slide, the school district percentage in the Comox Valley started at 34%, went consistently up, as you can see, over time between Wave 2 and Wave 6, as high as 40% of kids in that Wave 6 data collection, and then dropped somewhat to 36% in the last data collection, but still 36% of kids vulnerable is a little bit higher than what we see provincially. Just because percentages are sometimes point us in the wrong direction, it's also important to note that 36% of kindergarten children in this data collection was 210 children in the Comox Valley behind where we would want them to be at kindergarten entry. another sort of summary finding is that over time, the biggest challenge areas have been consistently on the social and emotional scales and the lowest on the language and cognitive scales. And that is very much a provincial trend. And it's a worrying provincial trend because we all know about the conversations that we're having now in respect to the increasing incidence of mental health in children, youth, adults, and the things that are measured on the social and emotional scales of the early development instrument are really things that can contribute to later challenges around mental health. So as those things go up, there's reason for us to be concerned. The positive side of the story is on the language and cognitive scales. And I talk about language and cognitive scales as being the sort of the traditional ABCs of school readiness. It's numeracy, early literacy, those kinds of things. And those are the places where we're doing really well around those basic numeracy and literacy skills, which obviously is in children's interests. But we also need to be thinking about their social emotional development. This shows you just the numbers again. You see on the left-hand side of this slide, the social competence scale. Social competence measures how kids get along in the playground. If they get into fights, if they are able to wait their turn, those kinds of things. And you can see that in the last wave of data collection, 18% of kids were vulnerable. The emotional maturity scale is more about how kids, are they aggressive? Are they anxious? Do they withdraw? There's a lot of questions in respect to that. And you can see that that's the highest level of vulnerability in our school district. Importantly, the kind of variability that we talked about earlier in terms of differences in vulnerability rates across school districts in BC, we see that variability across neighborhoods in the Comox Valley. Here's a map of the Comox Valley. For our research purposes, it's divided into 4 areas. We call them neighborhoods, but for those of us who live here, we know that these are not neighborhoods. But basically, the North Comox Valley area is the catchment of Huban Airport and Miracle Beach. Comox Valley View is the catchment of the Comox schools other than Airport, as well as Valley View. West Courtenay is Puntledge, Arden, Courtneyelle. And Cumberland, South Courtenay is Cumberland, Royston, and the islands. So as you can see in the last round of data collection, the highest vulnerability place, so the place where there were the most challenges, was in that Cumberland, South Courtenay area. I'll just note too that we report on these results by neighborhood. The district also receives school reports, so you can see potential differences, in an area like the North Courtenay area. Are there differences in terms of kids at Huban, kids at Airport, kids at Miracle Beach? So that is a way to kind of unpack the data in a different way if you're interested. But we keep to these numbers because they're bigger, and that makes the data more reliable. So it's a kind of basic statistical thing that if you have more kids in the group, your data is going to be more reliable. If you only have a small group of kids, that percentage thing flip-flops around all over the place. So it's an important thing to know about EDI data. So that Cumberland, South Courtenay area was the highest vulnerability, followed by the West Courtenay area, followed by North Courtenay, and then followed by Comox Valley View. We always like to put in this slide, because the important thing for us is that as we talk about percentage of kids, we also think about these are real kids. These are children who are entering kindergarten behind where we would want them to be. So we always like to think about the numbers of kids, because percentage doesn't always show that to us. So in Cumberland, South Courtney, 47% of kids was 72 children. West Courtney, 40% was 63 children. North Courtney had a higher percentage vulnerability rate than Comox Valley View, but that meant there was only 25 of the children in that area that were vulnerable, whereas Comox Valley View, their percentage was a little lower, but it still meant 50 kids. So one of the things that we've certainly learned from the EDI over time is that you can never really, sort of focus your area, or your attention in one or two areas, because vulnerabilities are spread across all neighborhoods, all families, all of that. So it just reminds us that it's something that we have to pay attention to everywhere. Very quickly, I'll just show you the trends in those places. Cumberland, South Courtney, as you can see, is really bumped up and its vulnerability. So the thing to look at here is the red line and where it goes over time. So you can see that it started low, was a bit lower, and then popped up. West Courtney has been consistently one of the higher vulnerability neighborhoods over time. You can see that that line is actually pretty flat. We see that kind of what I think about as enduring vulnerability in neighborhoods where there tends to potentially be more socioeconomic challenge. And so in some ways, our West Courtney neighborhood aligns with that finding. Comox Valley View has sort of creeped up over time, but then had quite a significant drop in the last year, in the last wave of data collection. One of the things we're also very alert to in EDI results is that we have to watch, we don't want to focus too much on one point in time. I was thinking about this today when I was listening to Dr. Bonnie talk about her 7-day rolling average. It's the same concept that we have a rolling average. And so for this Valley View neighborhood, we're going to want to watch what happens with the next time, because sometimes our data can be influenced by what I call the cohort effect. And the easiest way to describe that is that you can have a whole bunch of boys born in November in one year, and then the next year you might have a whole bunch of girls born in January. And we know developmentally that girls born in January are probably going to be developmentally a bit ahead than boys born in November, if that makes sense. So that cohort effect can take place. The North Courtney neighborhood is what I would call unstable, in a very kind way. It's a smaller number, and so it will tend to flop around a little bit more, but it hasn't been consistent. It's had some very high vulnerability. In fact, that high number in wave 6 compelled Alan and Jackie and myself and others in the community to start working in that neighborhood specifically to try to strengthen connections and supports for families in that neighborhood. But that at this point, we aren't seeing those same high vulnerabilities. How's my time, Jeff?
You're looking pretty good. You got about 10 minutes, Joanne.
Oh, Kelly. Okay. I'm getting near the end already. And I do need to put this in here because it's something, of course, that we're very aware of when we're thinking about what's going to happen with our next round of data collection, is that obviously COVID, particularly for young children who are not in the school system yet, are potentially quite isolated, having limited interactions with family and friends, limited activities in the community, reduction in childcare availability and accessibility, potentially increase in screen time. We don't understand what the impact of face masks and interaction, although somebody on the call, I don't know if you were on there yesterday, Jackie or Alan, was talking about, oh, it's Colleen Friendship from this, that she had been smiling with a very young child and the child was smiling back at her even though she was wearing a face mask. So starting to get some real nice signs that maybe there won't be a big negative impact around that, but we know that that kind of face-to-face contact with young children is very important to their development. And then just, the concern for hygiene and extra stress. So we do anticipate that our data is going to show some more challenges for children as they come into kindergarten, because those kids that in the past, haven't necessarily connected with peers or been active in the community, had those kind of social experiences that can make a difference, there probably will be more of those kids because of COVID. So it's just something that we have to be aware of and watch as we go forth. I'm just going to show you one, actually two, I think, maps from the MDI, which is the grade 4 children's voice and the grade 7 children's voice. So this shows the percentage of kids who talk about themselves as thriving, and it's a score that we put together from a number of questions on the MDI. And I always like to show this neighborhood one because it allows us to kind of think about how kids are doing later on as they go through school. And in this map, the lighter the color, the fewer kids who think of themselves as thriving. So in that West Courtney neighborhood, there's quite a big difference in terms of only 23% of the kids in that neighborhood fall into that thriving range. You can see that North Courtney and Comox Valley View come out about the same. And then interestingly, the Cumberland South Courtney area has a higher percentage of kids thriving. When we go to the grade 7 results, you'll see that across the board, the percentage of kids that are in that thriving range just goes down very quickly. That is consistent with what we see across the province and consistent about what we know as children enter adolescence, that there certainly are more challenges around their sense of well-being, their connection to adults. So there's just some reason to be thinking about what's the difference, really a strong difference between kids in grade 4 and grade 7 in respect to their well-being. You'll see that the differences between the neighborhoods becomes much less. So West Courtney 26, Cumberland 24, etc. So yeah, so it's just a different, I really love the MDI because it's in the children's voice. It really gives them an opportunity to share the kinds of things that are going on in their lives. So that is like a total water ski through the world of all the EDI, TDI, YDI, MDI, all of those acronyms, and what we've learned about kids in the Comox Valley over time. I think we're going to wait questions to the end, so I'm happy with that, unless anyone has a burning one at this stage. That was a heck of a lot of information.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Joanne, though. It prepares us well now to lead into some of the work that we've been doing in the district as a result of these conversations we've had about our vulnerability. Certainly from the check and the TDI and the EDI. And this will lead us into Jackie talking about some of the projects that we're working on across the district. Jackie, you ready to roll?
I'm ready to roll. It is always so interesting to Joanne, I'm so glad that that you got to go first, because so much of what my work is in the district really builds or is informed by or complements all of the stuff that Joanne and her team do. And I'm very grateful that this year I am actually seeing Joanne quite a bit. It's been, our paths intersect in many places, so it's been wonderful. And I'm really grateful that this position, this early learning position, is a full-time position. I look back now and I don't know how I did that 2 days a week last year, because you will see as we go through, there's a lot going on in early learning in our district. So the first thing we do, here's another acronym. The first thing I'm bringing up here is the Strengthening Early Years to Kindergarten Transitions. And I think Alan sent you an email. Did you get that out, Alan, with the attachments?
No, I'm going to send it to them at the end because I
Okay.
want them to see what they're going to know about. So they'll all receive this
Okay, perfect.
tonight in their boxes.
Okay, perfect. So you can see the little poster there for Strengthening Transitions. You'll get a full 2-page version of that in your email later. So this is a ministry initiative to support families and young children as they begin kindergarten. And I think especially building on Joanne's presentation there, we can see that clearly emotional and social development in children is an issue across the province. So I think that's partly why the province has put forward some of these initiatives. So we currently have 2 sites working on this, Courtney Elementary and Cumberland. And one of the goals of this project is that we develop communities of practice so that we are creating seamless relationships between early learning and care and the school setting, families, community partners, the school. We want to make that kindergarten transition as seamless as possible. And so that's what we're doing. And so in this project, the community ECEs and teachers, they are equal partners in the project. And we have found that at both these sites, there is a lot of investment by both these partners. The ECs and teachers, they're really bonded. We've got very strong teams at the schools. They're totally dedicated to this work. They really want to do best for children and families. And I find that the ECEs bring some really interesting ways of thinking about kids, and the teachers bring some insights that ECEs didn't have about what we do in our schools. So it's been a great learning experience. And so one of the things that we did last year, in fact, we had our second one literally the day before they closed everything down for COVID. We had community dinners. So we invited community ECEs and teachers to come for dinner, and we offered a professional development session. We did that twice, and they were very well attended. And it was lovely to see people connecting and sharing stories, and sometimes finding out that they shared families and kids. So that was a good experience. And and we want to continue on building strong connections between schools and families before kindergarten begins. And so our teams had some really creative, bold ideas about how to connect with families on school grounds, in classrooms, doing evenings, games nights, read a book night, pajama nights, things like that. And then COVID happened. And so our teachers were very discouraged, and it's been really challenging to think about how can we actually make this happen. But one of the great things about COVID is that because we couldn't do those things, I think the Compassionate Systems leadership was already on the table for supporting the Strengthening Transitions groups in the province. But this has been a year where we have really been able to go deep with our teams. Joanne and her colleague Pippa created this model for working with systems. No, I'm not Joanne's here. I'm going to be all nervous. I'm going to say it wrong. But anyway, except that I know Joanne and she's so lovely. She would never. But it's a way of being a team and bringing your voices to the table and recognizing that everyone has gifts and resources and skills and stories that inform how we interact together. So it's been really wonderful for us to go deep with our teams, and the tools that Joanne and Pippa have provided each month when we get together are really powerful. I've been amazed at how the teams, we use those tools, and lo and behold, at the end of it, we have a decision, or we have a priority, or we have a story, a new story. It's been really great. So I'm really appreciative of that. And so on our Cumberland site team, we have 2 ECEs, we have 3 kindergarten teachers, and our StrongStart and our principal. They've recently invited one of the CBCDA early years facilitators to join them. Sorry, and the community school coordinator. And at Courtney Elementary, we have the community ECEs with Jumpstart, and we have our StrongStart and our kindergarten teachers, principal, And our Healthy Families Coordinator, Jane Hughes, has been really helpful in that group as well. And the District Early Learning Support teams, Catherine Lepinin and Tracy Peterson have both been helpful to us and are really interested in this project. And recently, Chetty McDonald joined us as to help us really make sure we're connecting with the Indigenous lens as well. So that is strengthening transitions. It takes up, and each month I submit to the researcher, because this is a research project, I submit to the researcher what we are doing in our work. So this is top of mind for me all year long, this strengthening transitions, lots of accountability built in there. And then there's changing results for young children. We're in our 3rd year of changing results. This is a ministry initiative to develop communities of practice for early years educators in aid of supporting the social and emotional development of young children. Remember the EDI data again, right? And so interesting for me, Joanne, when you showed that MDI data about thriving, that is powerful stuff. That's like, I just want to talk about your presentation. There's so many interesting things in there. So I think this focus on the emotional and social development of young children is where it's at, I think, for the next little while. We know that children are coming in with some challenges in this area, and as are their parents. And we know, as Joanne mentioned, with COVID, I think it's going to be even compounded. So this is a inquiry approach. The teacher selects a child or educator. Again, it's community ECEs and our StrongStarts and our kindergarten teachers doing this project. With the idea that when you focus your lens on one child, you actually have heightened sensibilities about that issue in all of your classroom. So you start to notice things and observe things and wonder about things and change the way you talk with all of your students. And so we've been using the early learning framework as a launch for all of our discussions this year. We have a facilitator, Allison Bledsoe, and she's been amazing at supporting us in this. And the research, again, all the observations from teachers come to me, and I send them on to the researcher. And when Alan sends out that email, there's a link there for the changing results for young children website. And they've actually got a beautiful document that gives you all the research findings from last year. We have a full cohort of community ECE, StrongStart educators, and kindergarten teachers, and we share the facilitator and our thinking space with Powell River and Qualicum Parksville. So traditionally in the past, they've come up to us, we've hosted, but this year, of course, it's all been by Zoom, and we just have really become friendly with each other. It's been great to notice and learn more about each other. So at the beginning of the year, remember the beginning when we were all really, really worried and nervous and not really sure what was going to come in the fall? This is what Changing Results did. We had a provincial session, and we had Monique Gray Smith present, and we had, I don't even remember Monique Gray Smith presenting at our Pro D Day a couple of years ago. And we had Kim Schonert-Reichel doing a presentation on science of kindness. And I just think that day about joy and kindness and relationship was such a valuable experience for our teachers and educators who were part of that. It just was a beautiful way to center us on what's important when we're with children, what's really important when we're in doing our work. And then this bookmark on the side, that's those are the 7 facets of social and emotional well-being, and teachers choose from one of those. They choose one of those to focus on with their wonder child. And then that sort of forms their inquiry. So, okay, StrongStart. I work with the StrongStart people, and they're a wonderful team. We have 2 new educators to us in the last couple of years. Amy Whitley has joined us at Brooklyn, and Terry Lynn Higgs has joined us at Cumberland, and they've just blended in beautifully. They're just a really nice addition to the team, both of them. We worked in the fall a lot to big priority for me and Alan in the fall was to create a protocol for Strong Starts to be able to be open. We knew this was really a concern for families. They need connection. And our Strong Start educators were really wanting to get back to their regular work with families. So we only have 4 families at a time, which is hard. You cannot get a spot. We even had families booking into July, we found out. So we had to put a stop on the dates, but families were desperate to get out and meet with other families and get their children socialized. And they have been very grateful, vocally grateful. We keep hearing that. They're really happy to be in the building. And so, but because there's so few people allowed in the building, our team has continued quite a strong Facebook presence. So anything they do in this center that they feel families need to know about, they make sure they put that on their Facebook. And recently we've been reconnecting with our community partners who usually go into the Strong Starts, but of course can't. So we had them the last 2 meetings, we've had them join us and we've learned a lot, and they really are, they're still connecting with families and they're very willing to help out. So that was a good connection to make this year. And the early learning leads from the island, I'm part of the Early Learning Network. We knew that this past year has been really hard on our Strong Start educators. And so we decided to host 2 forums for Strong Start. So we had really good turnout all across the island. Strong Start educators came and shared, had a chance to talk together. Our team shared at one of them about some outdoor learning things. And it was a good experience, but teachers get to be in their classrooms with their students, and I go to classrooms and it feels pretty normal. Like you get to be with your kids, you get to do the job you're used to doing. For our Strong Start people, that has not been the case. They are really feeling that they're not getting to do the work that they, in the best way that they really want to. So it's been challenging for them for sure. The Early Learning Framework is the government document that we are expected to help promote alongside the curriculum. The new Early Learning Framework actually the old one was to 5 years, now it's 8 years. So this is really intended to be in our primary classes. And so last year I was able to release teachers in small groups to really do a deep dive into the first half of the document. But there's very limited funding that comes with that. And it's just been really hard to get something like that going this year, but hopefully as we figure out some funding for that, we can continue to do that. And I've presented at the admin meetings 3 times now about the Early Learning Framework, and I get them working. Last time I put them in breakout rooms, and Andrew Ferniehouse said, trust Jackie Anderson to put us in breakout rooms and make us work. But Serena Allison and I, our outdoor learning coordinator, she and I picked out this particular principle from the Early Learning Framework about land and connection to land and place. And we developed a bit of a presentation for the principles, and we then actually took that and have expanded on it at Courtney Elementary, and we're presenting again at Royston at their staff meeting. We do outdoor staff meetings around it and really get them thinking about your school land and how are students connecting to your land here. What are the relationships that happen? Because we know that children are often different outside than they are inside, and adults are often different outside than they are inside. We relate differently, we do different things, and it was very well received at Courtney Elementary. I'm looking forward to doing that at Royston next week. Welcome to Kindergarten is another thing that I had no idea when I started this job that Welcome to Kindergarten was actually a year-long event for me, because in the fall, we review what we did, we start getting our numbers ready, then I have to put the order together, and we order it in December. It came just at the beginning of spring break, and so those are all out now to schools, and schools are working to figure out what they're going to do. We know that they're going to be outdoors. They will probably be a walkthrough or a drive-through or scheduled only 2 or 3 families at a time, depending on what the public health orders allow for. But we do know that that welcome to kindergarten is a really important time for families. I forgot to mention earlier, you might have seen in the notes, but the Strengthening Transitions group at Cumberland, they actually made a survey for their families because they wanted to know what are the early childhood supports that in the community that parents are accessing, and how could the school be complementing that or promoting it or supporting it somehow. And when I read those results that came in from families, so they had two surveys. One was for existing kindergarten families, and one was for the kindergarten families that have just registered. And the existing kindergarten families, so many of them said welcome to kindergarten was really important for them in helping them feel comfortable about their child being at school. Seeing the school, being at the school, meeting the teachers. If they could look in and see the room, it was even better. And I think, we do this every day. We kind of sometimes maybe take for granted what school's like, but if it's your first time there, it's a big deal. And so we know we want to keep welcome to kindergarten happening. We just have to figure out how to do it in a safe way. Okay, and then the other thing I do is I have this year been going around to kindergarten classes, and I spend 6 weeks at a school. I pick 2 schools at a time, so I've done 10 schools now. By the end of the year, Miracle Beach and Brooklyn will be my last 2 at the end of the year. But I've been 6 weeks at 2 schools at a time, and it has been so great. And you'll see when Alan sends you that email, the newsletters that sort of show what I've been doing with teachers. So it's just wonderful to be able to be in a classroom for that length of time and I get to know the kids. Like I now recognize them in the store. When they see me, they look at me funny because they're pretty sure they know me, but they can't remember where they know me from. I work with the teacher and we come up with something they would like to focus on or learn more about. And we build it together, and it's really been fun. So I've done some outdoor learning stuff. I've done literacy things. I've done math at Cumberland, and I'm really excited about doing some pedagogical narration, which is an aspect of the early learning framework around documenting learning. Doing that at Cumberland too. So I'm really looking forward to that. That'll be a new thing for me to really be focused on it in an intentional way. And then I've also made some LRC kits with Carol Walters, our CST, literacy CST, and Serena, our outdoor learning CST. And so we've made 2 outdoor literacy kits. These are the newsletters that you'll get in your inbox after this meeting. And you may have already seen them. I don't know if Mary Lee sent them out to everyone, but I decided this year, I got inspired looking at another district who've done that. I thought, I kind of like that. And maybe it's even just for me to keep my head sort of connected with what's all happening. And so these are intended for public consumption about what's all things early learning in our district. And then finally, the last thing I do is I sit on the Early Years Collaborative. This is a group of 30 plus agencies and community partners who work together to support early childhood experiences in the Valley. The school district has traditionally always sat on the leadership table of that. So that's what I do, and I co-chair. And interestingly, a number of these people on this collaborative are very involved in childcare. They live, work, breathe, sleep childcare. I'm just wondering, it might be a real interesting idea to have some of them come alongside us and help us with this very interesting, new, challenging chapter as we launch into childcare ourselves. And then they're also part of our Welcome to Kindergarten events, and they support our StrongStarts. Many of them from community support folks come in our StrongStarts and meet with families. The website's there. If you haven't heard of it before or seen it, checked it out. There's some interesting things on there about all the things we do. And the Connections Project is the big thing that we're undertaking right now. And Chris and Joanne, of course, shared about that last month at our board meeting. I think, was it last month or not long ago? Yeah.
Mhm.
And that's me. That's the end. Whew.
Well, you did
Now,
it. it's 7:42, and now I think we could take questions, Michelle, if you want us to be able to answer them on any three parts of this.
Would be wonderful. Now I just need to change my screen so I can see everybody better. And so I can see Christy's hand if she wants. Oh, there she is. Well, she's not in her RV right now. She's somewhere else.
No,
tonight.
I'm on the deck, but I just had to go chase after the dog. So
Well, wasn't it chickens earlier and now it's the dog?
yes, actually, yes, it was. They heard my rooster crow. It's true on the earlier meeting. Thank you for your presentations, ladies. Those are amazing. And, you know, it's great to see all the work that's being done and that is to come. It's very exciting.
So who has a question? Oh, Janice, I see your hand raised.
So looking at the data and getting the charts, is there a chance we can get a copy of those and so we can have them? I'm not sure if you can share them on that one. But I do have, I guess, a comment and a concern over the EDI and the vulnerability. To me, it's concerning. And I look at the Valley and that says we need to have more supports within our schools for our students because the vulnerability rate, it's not decreasing, it's up and down, it's all over the place. So I'm wondering what we can do to support you and your work, because one of our roles is ensuring that all students get the supports they need on that one there. And the earlier you get them started, the better off as they get older. And when I look at the numbers and the kids as they older not feeling satisfied, to me that was also concerning. And I wonder that is combination of them not being students who are not well prepared for school tend to struggle as they get older. And that struggling as they has impact on their mental well-being, stress, and the whole combinations of things. So I guess when I look at those numbers, it saddens me and it concerns me. And I'm wondering what more we can do to support the students in our Valley, because I think that there is more work to be done. I just don't know what we can do to support you in your work in getting into the classroom. So that would be my thoughts. And I'm wondering if I can get a copy of the charts that you have. So when I advocate, as my role as a trustee is advocating at the provincial level for funding, then I've got some data that I can say, hey, this is what's happening in my district. And this is a proof in the pudding that we need more supports. And I see today that the government appointed a student advocate, and maybe that we can go through that process there. So that was my comment and my concerns. And if you guys can answer that, great. If not, we'll be further conversations.
Great. And Mr. Douglas?
So thank you, Janice, very much for those nice comments. And yet we have the same concerns you have. And so one of the things you need to know as a board that you've done is you've given us the opportunity to have a 1.0 early learning person. That's a huge thing in a school district to have that. And it's a dedicated position, and we really, really appreciate that. So thank you very much for that. You've also, through the superintendent, have supported all the work that I did in early learning prior to Jackie coming and continue to do to help with Jackie as we go along this road, hosting the meetings. This connections project we talked to you about at the last board meeting, that's a very big project, and we're looking for probably some space to be able to do some programs out of, and finding empty space in a school for us to run a program, that would be really helpful for us, or letting us be on the school grounds. That's a great thing, because we're all in this together. And everything we can do to improve the life chances of kids, that's what we want to do. That's our mandate. And so that collaborative that we work with, that is the big power of it. We host that meeting at the LRC. Everybody comes together. Jackie and myself were lucky enough to become recipients of the provincial funding. When she talked about changing results for young children and SEY2K, that is targeted money that came to our district because we went after those grants to be able to do this work. Not every district does it, and not every district gets to do both of them. So we've been very, very lucky, and you've supported our work with the EDI and the MDI and the TDI and the check. Jackie, do you want to add anything else to that?
Well, I think it'd be really interesting, maybe if you're interested to hear about some of the things I don't know if we have time for it tonight, but I'd be happy to meet with you about some of the things that the schools have come up with as part of our compassionate systems leadership model. We have built systems icebergs and real vision sort of what we want to see happen. And it was so helpful to have a big group in that room, our LSTs, our Indigenous folks, our healthy families. It was just a lot of eyes on the situation at Courtney Elementary, particularly in that neighborhood, which has its own, I mean, this is one of the things I've learned is that Cumberland and Courtney Elementary are very different communities, and they both have needs, but they're very different needs. And I've really appreciated that with the Strengthening Transitions work, the ministry's been very clear. This is about your community, your context trumps all. So whatever your community need is, that's where you go. There's very few strings attached to that money. And so Courtney Elementary has quite a vision. They've got a vision. And one of the things would be to try to create a community hub where families can really be in the school accessing community supports and things like that. But these things are complicated because right now we can't have families in the school, like all of that. But there is a dream. There really is a dream. And I would be happy to spend some time talking about more specifically the things that those schools are aiming for with you if you're interested.
I know Sheila's waiting with her hand up, but I just wanted to add to what Jackie said, because if you'll notice, Janice, in the information that was shared to us by Joanne, Cumberland and Courtney are two of our most vulnerable areas, and those are the two schools that we're focusing on for the Strengthening Transitions and the Changing Results program. So we are trying to put the resources where we have the greatest need.
Sorry, Sheila. I just have to add one little bit. Number one, thanks so much for those comments, Janice, and no problem getting you all the data. We give you more data than you would ever want, I'm sure, but we'll make sure you get all the information. You know, one of the challenges in terms of the early years world is there's a significant amount of fragmentation. You know, we have a public school system that starts when kids are 5 years old, and there's a place where people can coalesce around the needs of kids. But in the early years, there's a lot more fragmentation. And so that's why all this attention to collaboration is so critical. And I really do feel like we're turning the tide a little bit in the Comox Valley, but I'm super optimistic about the fact that we are transitioning to the school system having more responsibility for the younger children through the childcare system, because it will give us some structural framework to really coalesce in a way that's more facilitated. So and I just know with all of the strong partnerships in this community that we're gonna, we don't have to wait until the Ministry of Education tells us what to do. In that sense, we can partner with each other, figure out what's right for our kids and move on forward. So I think we're coming into some really good few years here.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Now, I see Trustee Sheila has her hand up. Sheila?
Yeah, thanks. I just, have been following this for many years. Very interested to see the partnerships developing and appreciative of the work that Alan and all the rest have done through the early years collaborative, because I absolutely agree that, we were in, so well placed to get the grant money to develop the childcare planning as well because of the strong collaborative. And when the minister came and saw, I think it was a meeting at Child Development, wasn't it? And there were just so many people at the table, and it really, I think, impressed us with the readiness of the Valley to address it. Really interesting buy-in from all the politicians too, and Edwin Grieve talking to me about his concerns for the North End, and then the commitment that we really embraced about having childcare spaces at all the school grounds and building the childcare, and the work that Ian's done to work collaboratively in that area. So there's just so much process. It's going to be really interesting about like moving childcare from 3 ministries into the Ministry of Education doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be delivered through school districts. It's still a bit up in the air, isn't it? And it's going to need to be delivered through partnerships And we're still dealing with licensed private care as well and bringing that quality into the circle. I had one question when you were first talking about the EDI and the vulnerability factor. And I remember originally presentation a long time ago that was talking the vulnerability score, when you say it's like 36% or 46%, and there are 5 or 6 different scales that get measured, different those factors of income and literacy and all this different things. Was it like 4 out of 5 or something like that vulnerability, or is it all 5 have to be at that rate? The average
No.
of 5? What is it?
It's vulnerable on at least one of those scales. So some kids are vulnerable on only one, and then the whole range up to 5, all 5. So we have children who are in the vulnerable range across all 5 scales, but they only count as one, no matter how many scales they are vulnerable on, if that makes sense.
I guess it does. But so can you dig down in the data when on a neighborhood level or something? Is that a good planning tool for a school that wanted to use that as sort of baseline of their planning?
Yeah, I mean, the data's there, and I think, digging down into it can be really helpful. There, even within the scales now, there are what we call subscales, which are really make your eyes cross when you're looking at them. But they, so for the best example of it is, we have vulnerability on the physical scale. And one of the subscales of the physical scale measures fine motor development. So are children doing well in respect to how they hold a pencil, as compared to the other scale, which measures more of a gross motor development? And, can they climb stairs or go up the slide? And so breaking that down can really be helpful, guiding to whether it's the schools or others in the community that are working with those kids in terms of where they might want to focus their energies. So if you're interested in that stuff, I'm happy to walk you through some of it. But for planning purposes, both the scales and subscales can be quite interesting.
Thanks, Joanne. It's so interesting to also get the numbers, not just the percent, but the absolute numbers.
It helps to remind us that we're talking about kids.
Yeah. That's kids
Thank
not
you.
graduating that ahead. We can deal with, we can really do this. So thanks.
Okay, thank you. I have Sarah Jane and then Christy after in the trustee lineup.
I think those were great presentations. Thanks so much. I've been hearing about these collaborations for quite some time now, and I'm pretty excited to see the implementation, but the one question that I did have was, have you guys found that in the past, sometimes with some of your early learning events and things, that you're having a hard time reaching all the parents? And how do you go about connecting with parents when there's no like register of them, I guess? Because I know sometimes I've heard from parents all over the district here and there that, oh, I didn't know about this program, or, oh, I didn't know about this. Is there strategies in place to really be connecting with those parents besides the general, like, sort of public forums?
Well, I think one of the really exciting things we have going right now is the Connections Project, which came right out of this EDI data, and has received significant funding now from the Comox Valley Foundation to create something where families can access, and it's like Joanne was saying, there's been some fragmentation, and we don't want to reinvent the wheel. We want to build on what we've already got, use those relationships we already have. But you're quite right that this is the issue in schools every year. You probably hear about it, that there's kids that come who I mean, you can do these great transition meetings with the CDA. You can have families come and walk through the school. Like you can be prepared for the kids you know about. It's the kids you don't know about that can really, throw a wrench into things. So exactly finding ways in community connections to reach those families, and often it's by word of mouth. So you kind of have to start small, but then you need those parents really to become advocates for their neighbors who they know need help, and they bring them to whatever is available. So maybe Joanne, you want to pick up maybe more about what the Connections Project might do in that sense, or is that enough? I don't know.
I mean, maybe the only thing to add is that at least the way it's rolled out in the north part of the community is that we're looking at trying to have access points for parents closer to where they live. So hubs, if you like, although they won't be big fancy buildings, they might be tents or something, but places where people know close to home that they can connect with other parents. Because in the surveys that we did, asking parents what was important, a lot of them said just they wanted to be able to connect to other folks. And of course, we've had all those huge challenges around that with the COVID, but so those
maybe having like a little package with that information available in like their little birth package that they get to take home. I remember my midwife gave me information about like baby groups and stuff in Shawnigan Lake when I first had my daughter, and I thought that was really helpful. But I think it's great work, and I'm excited to see what happens in the district. I know everyone's so passionate about it, so well done.
And don't forget, before we go to the last question, because we're almost at 8 o'clock, that the Connections Project, we've been given more funding from the foundation to scale this to the entire Comox Valley. Okay, and so we actually have a coordinator now, and that coordinator's job, especially in the north, will be to reach out to those families, find out where they are, and invite them in at whatever level they want to participate.
Thank you. And Christy had her hand up, and then we did have a question in the chat, and we'll see what Christy's question is. How hard it is.
Just super quick. Sorry, I just wanted to know if those numbers that you see in our district and in the valley, is that similar in other island communities? And also, what is that representation like across our province and then in comparison to Canada? So do we have those numbers where like, are we as bad as we might feel right now? Or is this a representation of similar communities on Vancouver Island, and it's going to be different than North Van or whatever? That's my question.
I mean, the Comox Valley has been a bit higher than the provincial average over time. One of the numbers shows that there are some places in the province that are much higher than that, some that are lower. So we're in, although we're higher than the average a bit, we're not like at the extreme continuum. So I would say there's lots of similarities with other communities. The one thing that puzzles the bejesus out of me is that overall in BC, we seem to have higher level of vulnerability than in other parts of the country. So we do the EDI work right across the country in every province. And for some reason over time, the vulnerability levels across BC have been higher, and we're still trying to figure out what that's about. But we're we're a little bit above the middle of the pack in BC.
Thank you. We did have one question in the chat, but I'm going to see if maybe Mr. Douglas can email us the response if he knows the answer, because we're pretty much out of time to try to keep to our ending at 8 o'clock. I wanted to say that Joanne, you started out early on in your presentation talking about data, and we don't know what we don't know, and we can't support things if we don't know what the baseline is. And listening to people's trepidation about the gathering of information through some of the testing that we do. And so it's an interesting, if we can't fix it if we don't know that there's a problem, and in order to fix it, we need data. So I want to thank everybody. I want Joanne Schroeder and Jackie Anderson and Alan Douglas for doing the presentations for us tonight, and the test as well. with our paper and pens.
Yeah, thank
And-
God I'm as smart as a grade 4 student.
And Assistant Superintendent Manning, thank you for the suggestion you brought forward to have these as topic items for the meeting tonight. I believe that the trustees will have found them really valuable, and the community that will be watching this afterwards as well, with the information that they can go back to and refer to. And thank you all for attending tonight, and for everybody else who watches this recording at a later date.